Hello, dear friends. This is a synthesis of the global geopolitical changes we are experiencing. Opinion piece. Tectonic changes. Strong geopolitical shifts. China is on the verge of bankruptcy. She has lost the mandate of heaven. A revolution is brewing in China. Systemic collapse of Western civilization. Most negative scenarios fail. Eurozone activity slows in June. When the Fed tightens, the global economy suffocates. The Davos Forum remains committed to the Great Reset. The magnetic field is already 25% less strong. That means we have already lost magnetic density. The fleet is ready for the arrival of the great solar flare. Russia prepares to launch free energy technology. Russian biological method to transmute chemical elements. Let's start. Most of the negative scenarios for the planet have collapsed and the Earth's magnetic field has lost a quarter of its strength, meaning we have lost magnetic density according to the new planetary status update published by Cobra in the 2012 portal of the Intelligence Center for the Victory Flight. It adds that the Chinese financial system is on the verge of bankruptcy and that the revolution is brewing in China because Xi Jinping has lost mandate of heaven, in quotes, according to Dragon sources, and is becoming more dictatorial by the day, bent on invading Taiwan at all costs. For its part, Russia is preparing to implement the new financial system and to launch free energy technologies. This will include a stable international reserve currency backed by gold and based on a basket of wild currencies. In Europe, the Davos Forum is trying to implement its version of the Great Reset, which is no longer global, at the cost of scaring the population by engineering a systemic collapse of Western civilization. But the system is far more resilient than they expect, and their attempt will fail. Tectonic changes refer to earth movements produced by plate shifts, which cause deep, radical, and very strong changes. This same term has been extended to political language. It is deep, radical, and very strong changes in consumer habits and in the citizen's perception of the here and now. There have been changes in the scale of values. It is to say, the way of understanding the world has changed drastically. Updated report. There are massive tectonic changes happening behind the scenes, and not much can be reported on that for tactical reasons. Therefore, Cobra's publications are less frequent. In recent weeks, there have been major victories against the Chimera fleet. There are two sub-factions of the Chimera. The first, called the Orion sub-faction, and the second, the Andromeda sub-faction. The Orion sub-faction is mainly located in underground bases and is being driven out. The Andromeda sub-faction has infiltrated the surface population in recent years, realizing that their final defeat is near and will be a little more difficult to eliminate, as they are using humankind as a living shield. The forces of light have managed to infiltrate the Chimera chain of command and detect it, and now corroding the Chimera structure from within. Most of the negative scenarios for the planet have collapsed, but there is still one rather unlikely, but very dangerous scenario that has not yet been resolved. The forces of light have completed the construction of both the Dyson spheres, the one surrounding the Sun and the one surrounding the Earth. The fleet of the Galactic Confederation is thus ready for the arrival of the solar flare. They just need to free the surface of the planet and prepare humankind as well. Earth's magnetic field is already 25% less strong, and the strong solar flares expected during next solar maximum in the next few years may collapse Earth's magnetic field to the degree necessary for the magnetic excursion, leading to a physical polar shift. According to science, the period of maximum solar activity will occur during the year 2025. Russia. On the planet's surface, strong geopolitical changes are also taking place. First, Russia is busy preparing for the implementation of the new global financial system backed by gold and commodities. This will include an international reserve currency based on a basket of currencies, and a stable digital currency backed by gold. Behind the scenes, the Russians are also quietly preparing to launch free energy technology, and will do so as soon as the power of the dark forces diminishes enough to make it safe to do so. Russian scientists have successfully created a technology that can alter the protons in an atom and change the atom itself, creating one element from another. The inventors claim to have created a method to transmute chemical elements through biochemistry. This method would consist of artificially producing certain chemical elements and their isotopes from other chemical elements in a biological way, without using atomic reactors, cyclotrons, enriched uranium, or heavy water. The method would pose no threat to the environment. It would also be applicable for the deactivation of nuclear waste. China. The situation in China is a totally different story. A few years ago, Dragon sources cryptically communicated, in quotes, "Xi has lost the mandate of heaven." This has now become common knowledge. Modern Chinese politics is a hall of mirrors, and only they know the true allegiance of each player in the game. Xi Jinping is under strong Jesuit influence and is trying to cling to power, becoming increasingly dictatorial. In 2012, a year before Xi Jinping became General Secretary of the CCP, he was housed in a Jesuit college in Dublin, Ireland. The Jesuit-run Belvedere College hosted Xi Jinping during his visit to Ireland in February 2020. Not everyone in China is happy about this, and the Shanghai clique is trying to remove him from power. This would be the real reason behind the Shanghai closures, as Xi Jinping is using the closures to block the activities of the Shanghai clique. Although, on average, the Chinese can tolerate more abuse than Westerners, they also have enough, and beneath the surface of Chinese society, a revolution is brewing. China's financial system is on the verge of collapse, and the authorities are misusing apps to prevent citizens from accessing their banks and their money to avoid bank runs. Xi has also signed a decree to legalize, in quotes, special military operations, obviously aimed at Taiwan. China maneuvers again near Taiwan a week before the NATO summit. As promised, Dragon sources reacted immediately with the disclosure in the mainstream Chinese media. Davos. The Davos Forum is still trying to enforce its version of the Great Reset. Now, it's their life or death moment, and they are trying to scare everyone. They have engineered a systemic collapse of Western civilization. The system is far more resilient and adaptable than they expect, and their attempt will fail. Game over, victory to the light. Spain. IKEA raises prices in Spain in the face of rising costs. The Spanish economy grew by 0.2% in the first quarter, 2 points less than the previous quarter. Mortgages slow down their growth to 4.5% due to inflation and rates. The IBEX 35 consolidates the 8,200 level thanks to the easing of debt. The Spanish stock market rises 1.7% and recovers 8,200 points due to the rise of Wall Street. Iberdrola leads the IBEX and is back within striking distance of the €10 mark. The IBEX 35 clings to 8,100 points despite the decline of the banks, with Sabadell in the lead. Indra plunges on the stock market after the takeover of the Spanish government's boat. Journalist José Luis Balbín dies at the age of 81 in Madrid. Violent assault on the Melilla fence leaves 18 migrants dead. Fire brigades keep watch over places affected by fires in Navarre. A baby is born in the Barcelona metro. 3 workers and the passenger deliver the baby. Metro underground. Americas. Negative consequences for America of the historic rate hike. When the Fed tightens, the continent suffocates. The strike over the closure of the smelter in Chile puts Codelco in check. ECLAC in Chile calls for a transition to a care society in Latin America. Artists Michael Osorbo and Otero Alcántara are sentenced to 9 and 5 years in prison in Cuba. Cuba will submit the new family code to a referendum in September. Peru's poor need massive food support, according to José Távara. Indigenous people call for a government commission to combat illegal logging in Peru. Peru's Congress hopes Castillo will not delay his testimony over allegations. After stifling Caracas with sanctions, the West looks to its oil in the face of the dispute with Russia. Report reveals that the Venezuelan regime spies on citizens' phone lines. Gustavo Petro talks with the Venezuelan government to reopen the borders. More than 1 million Colombians have been exiled by the conflict. Former FARC leaders admit abuse of hostages during the conflict. Brazilian consumer prices rise more than expected in mid-June. Brazil's inflation eases in June, but remains above 12%. Bolsonaro says many Colombians will leave their country after Petro's victory. The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights is concerned about the emergency regime in El Salvador. Attacks on press freedom in the Dominican Republic. Mexico. Bank of Mexico accelerates rate hike to contain inflation. Mexico's economy posts its strongest expansion in a year as it recovers. Teachers vandalize education office in Guerrero, southern Mexico. The bodies of Jesuits and a tour guide murdered in northern Mexico are recovered. López Obrador criticizes the European Union for its actions in Ukraine and the Julian Assange case. In quotes, they act as subordinates to economic power. The influence of elites in Mexico threatens the anti-corruption fight, experts say. The US is preparing to claim that Mexico violated the free trade agreement. Controversial woman who speaks alien. You probably already know Maeve Walker, a Colombian TikToker based in Mexico who claims to be, in quotes, a galactic interdimensional portal and to speak alien language, claims that made her a hit on television. More than 46,000 irregular migrants in transit have arrived in Panama this year. Nicaraguan opposition group rejects possible dialogue between businessmen and Ortega. Microsoft chooses Uruguay for a pioneering laboratory. Argentina seeks to buy diesel amid a national shortage. Argentina gets IMF approval for a loan disbursement. Alberto Fernández calls for Argentina's incorporation into BRICS, which represents 42% of the world's population and 24% of global gross domestic product. BRICS holds the second day of its summit, this time in an expanded format. Argentina hopes the BRICS summit will boost its application to join the bloc. The European Union sees great potential for energy in Argentina, but it depends on investment. The Decolonization Committee reiterates the call for a dialogue on the Falklands Islands. Ecuador. Social protest in Ecuador escalates and the possibility of dialogue is postponed. Massive march in the center of Quito with the seat of government under protection. Ecuador confirms 4 deaths during protests. Resignations, dismissals, and strong protests over measures against indigenous people. Ecuadorian parliamentarians formalize request to debate Lasso's impeachment. Medellín and Sao Paulo are the final bidders to operate the Quito Metro. USA. US Congress passes land bank gun control reform. US Supreme Court overturns abortion rights. Texas outlaws abortion and celebrates Supreme Court ruling. Biden urges November vote to pass abortion rights into law. Vandalism by pro-abortion extremists spreads. US new home sales rise unexpectedly in May. Yellowstone National Park reopens after historic flooding. A 18-foot python, the largest ever found in Florida, is captured. US denies responsibility for global food shortages, in quotes. The government denies all responsibility, as they used to say on the X-Files. Europe. The start of the wheat harvest in France is brought forward. Eurozone activity slows sharply in June. The West sell-off in European corporate debt indicates. Brussels to issue 50 billion in bonds in 6 months to finance recovery fund. ECB's De Guindos pours cold water on the bond sale news. Europe rebounds on the back of Wall Street and Asia in the last session of the week. European Union leaders give the green light for Croatia to adopt the euro in 2023. 5 countries want to delay the phase-out of fossil fuel cars in the European Union: Italy, Portugal, Slovakia, Bulgaria and Romania. Germany activates the alert level of the National Gas Emergency Plan. Germany activates the second gas emergency phase due to the Russian cutback. Gas rises almost 7% after Germany raises alert level. European Union works on emergency energy plans. Brussels prepares a common emergency plan to cope with more gas cuts. The European Parliament approves a plan to store gas before winter. Crucial European Union aid to help Ukrainian refugees find work. Europe's rail and air transport workers are stretched to the limit and are demanding improvements. European Union leaders grant Ukraine and Moldova candidate country status. European Union leaders say Russia is, in quotes, solely responsible for food crisis. Poland was a recent victim of cyber attacks from Russia. Criticism of Greece's treatment of refugees continues. Turkey and Saudi Arabia seal a new era of cooperation after the Khashoggi case. United Kingdom. London gives 1 month to export Ukrainian grain to avert world famine. Prince Charles expresses his sorrow at the Commonwealth's historic relationship with slavery. Boris Johnson urges opponents to keep an open mind about his plan to deport illegal migrants to Rwanda. Economy. Wall Street closed Thursday in the green, with the Dow Jones up to 0.64%. Wall Street posts strong gains to close a bullish week. The dollar falls as markets reconsider the pace of interest rate hikes. Banks are prepared to withstand a severe recession, says the Fed. In times of panic, investors need a healthy dose of optimism. Former Obama economist warns of heightened risk of stagflation. The economies return to the 70s scenario. It's a real risk, argues Jason Farman. Boeing says supply chain problems will persist in 2023. Commodities. Crude oil rises but posts its second weekly drop on fears of a recession. Texas crude oil rises 3.2% to close at $107.62 a barrel. Bitcoin, Ethereum and Dogecoin fall. Metals. Gold closes higher but falls for the week. Copper posts biggest weekly loss in a year in London. Copper heads for its worst weekly loss in a year. Tin sinks. Asia. Afghanistan 6.1 magnitude earthquake. At least 1,000 dead and hundreds injured. Rescue efforts continue in Afghanistan after devastating earthquake. Iranian court orders US to pay $4 billion for scientists' deaths. Russia threatens Lithuania to blockade Kaliningrad. Russia claims to have 2,000 Ukrainian fighters surrounded south of Severodonetsk. volunteers evacuate disabled and elderly people from Donbass. The mystery of the Russian generals who have died is unknown. Putin blames the G7 for irresponsible macroeconomic policy. Dmitry Medvedev explains the reasons for the degradation of European politicians. In quotes, they are incapable of taking responsibility. Lavrov accuses the United Nations of delaying a solution of the world food crisis. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.